Welcome to the Old Fashion Masonic Podcast, where we talk all things Freemasonry while drinking an old fashioned. I'm Brian.
And I'm Russ.
And you are?
Dale Morrow.
Dale Morrow. So we're going to talk about Masonic buildings. Are they an asset or a liability? So we're going to queue up some questions. So Russ has been part of moving a lodge, the largest lodge in the world at one time and largest in Kansas, from one place to another because of financial reasons. And most worshipful Dale, past Grand Master of Kansas in 2019-2020, was in when the Grand Lodge of Kansas sold and or moved buildings. Fair?
Yes.
So let's just talk about pros and cons about owning a building. Okay? So some pros, obviously. There's some tax deductions, right? There's your privacy and control over your space. You get some equity. And it's an asset, question mark. But let's talk about some cons, right? There's a lot of upfront costs if you got to go purchase it, right? Property taxes and insurance, always, okay? You could be in a depreciating area that you're fine, but everyone else, the area is just sucking you down. The upkeep and maintenance is never cheap.
Right.
That's a whole nother problem. Expenses continue to rise even when membership declines, right? And it's not as easy to move if you have bad neighbors around you, right? So what did I miss there on some pros and cons?
So, number one, you've got a question mark after an asset. So, an asset, in my mind, is something that makes you money.
Okay, or appreciates. Okay, I like it.
So, if it doesn't make you money, and I'm going to quote Robert Kiyosaki here, not one of my favorite financial guys, but it's something
Rich Dad,
he
Poor
said.
Dad?
Huh?
Is that Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
Yeah.
Okay,
I think so.
All right.
So, he said anything that doesn't make you money is a liability.
Sorry, my wife. Dale's talking about you, honey. Keep going.
That's quite a...
Dale said it, I didn't, hon.
Okay. So, but anyway, my big problem is, we spend more time financing and upkeep and tax and insurance and property taxes all on our buildings. We have no time left for doing what Masons need to do.
So you're part of a lodge that I call the $1 a day lodge, $365 a year. You don't own a building, right? You're financially, you're in really good shape.
Yes.
You can meet whenever you want, just move your charter, right? Mm-hmm. And why aren't more lodges doing that? I mean, why do people tie their lodge to a building when the lodge is the makeup of the people? Why do they do that?
Yeah, and a lot haven't come to that realization. The first time I got wind of this was quite a few years ago. I went to a conference of Grand Masters. And the first time, the Grand Master of Washington, D.C. was there and did a talk on buildingless lodges. They had several lodges that had got rid of their building, put all of their furnishings in a trailer, rented a meeting room in a hotel, paid 2 teenagers to move their stuff out of their trailer and into this meeting room. They had meetings once a month on a Saturday morning, and they went from losing $50,000 a year to financially stable and gain membership. That hit me.
Yeah.
And that's when I started investigating why.
So how did they gain membership? Do you know? Was it because of other members joining them, or were they making Masons?
Actually, they were making Masons.
Okay.
They went to a Saturday meeting and not a night meeting. And that was another thing that actually got us. Some of the older guys came back. They were on a ground floor. And Saturdays, the working people came in. They started bringing in some working people who had conflicts during the week, and they actually gained membership, and that whole thing kind of intrigued me. So I started doing some investigating when I got back, and that's kind of when I started talking about this and investigating a lot of this. And we do have a problem with a lot of our lodges in rural communities, especially. They're tied to their building, and their primary they do pancake feeds, they do all of this stuff on the side just to support their building.
Right.
They have no time left for doing Masonic things, which are cultivating brotherly love, relief, and truth.
Let's put this in personal terms. To me, what I'm hearing is the equivalent of a family goes to buy a home. Mm-hmm. They have this home and they can't afford it. Something's happened, but instead of let's appropriately resize. Mom and dad are going out and working all this time, getting all this overtime so we can pay for the house. But what they didn't pay attention to their relationship and with their kids, and the family has failed. So is this similar in that standpoint to the lodge building is the home, the parents are the makeup of it, and we've let the membership down? Is that a stretch?
Yeah, it's kind of...
You're working so much to keep this building that you're not focused on making masons. Exactly. This is what we do.
Well, and the thing of it is, it's not really making masons is really not our biggest game.
Okay.
Once you make the mason, you've got to make the mason.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
You've got to make them masons.
You just made a new mason, and he's sitting in lodge for the first time. And he hears the financial report, and the lodge is upside down, and they have to have another pancake feed. And quite frankly, I'm fairly confident most new masons go, why are we doing a pancake feed? At what point in time does that actually move the needle anywhere?
Right. Or what do you do at lodge? We do pancake feeds.
I just paid $100 a year for my dues. Why don't I just pay $200? Would that help?
Well, we talk about that a lot. I think a lot of Masons we should be holding on to buildings, but I think that people underestimate what a Mason is willing to pay to stay in a fraternity as well. Right. Yeah. That's one thing. So
one thing that I think a building does do is it does give a lodge a home where they can actually do things when they want. So fair. if you don't have a home, you actually have to be on your game. Mm-hmm. You have to be better at scheduling. You have to be really good at communication to get people to a different place, to do degree work, to do things. And you have to, the officers, especially senior officers, have to be on their game.
Sure.
And that's possible. Sure. It's just one of those, because sometimes
your trustees
or the trustees even, because sometimes it's just easier to go to lodge and hey, I've got a degree on Tuesday
and you don't have to worry about other people's calendars.
Exactly.
So it's like just sharing buildings.
Yeah.
So let's change this up a bit. Lodge buildings, your buildings owned by the lodge, are a modern invention.
Okay.
Prior to 1900, you could probably count on both hands the number of lodges that own their own building in the state of Kansas.
Okay.
So, our beginnings, they met in taverns, they met in churches, they met in houses, they met in fields, they met in places they already had.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Why did it change?
Yeah. Well,
Greed?
people decide. Yeah. Well, we started there again. We started gaining membership, and they started getting a treasury, and they started getting a big treasury. Well, what are we going to do with our treasury? Yeah, we need a building.
Post Civil War.
Yeah.
1865 on, you get into the 1900s. Things were just the industrial age. It was just everything was moving.
Yeah.
And so people actually had money.
Yeah.
They didn't have to worry about eating.
Yeah.
They could spend money doing other things.
And And the beginnings of our fraternity, of course, as you well know, in 1717, the main lodge and the Grand Lodge of England met in a dang tavern.
Yeah.
And we always have. We've met in existing buildings. We've met in.
They had alcohol. They had alcohol in the lodge room. Disgusting.
Yeah, we've had. Have had houses that for decades and decades, people held lodge meeting in people's houses.
In their cellars.
Yeah.
So how many lodges do you think there are in Kansas right now, roughly?
About 184 last time I looked.
Okay. 184, plus or minus, right? What percentage of those, frankly, do you think are holding on for the inevitable? 30%? 30% would be 50.
I'm thinking that number's quite higher.
You think half of them are holding on for the inevitable?
Right.
How many of them are broke and they just haven't decided to?
How many are?
Some personal experience with that. Belle Plaine, we got to the point where we were down to like 30 members, and we could not support the building anymore. Right. We had to sell ours, and we just started to rent space from Lodge and Derby, and inevitably just went in and merged with them. But we had to do the same thing. We were spending more time supporting the building than we were doing Masonic.
You weren't focused on masonry. You're focused on being a homeowner.
Yeah.
How many lodges do you think that folks own in Kansas right now that they're just not the right size? Are there some lodges? I mean, I know there's some lodges with a lot of money, but you know what? That money can run out real fast. So
the big model that worked for many, many, many years was Lodge owned a 2-story building in a town. Mm-hmm. They leased out the first story to a business which actually paid for the entire building, basically.
Yeah. Yes.
That model in small town America is dwindling. Mm-hmm. Most of those lodges, the town's drying up, and nobody has a business in that 4-story anymore. Mm-hmm. Right? Those with that model are in trouble.
Yeah.
Okay. With a few exceptions.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So Wichita area, we've got probably 9 lodges, something like that.
Somewhere like that.
So of the several lodges, how many lodges do you think there should be in Wichita? I got a number in mind. I got no problem.
Probably 2.
That's my number. There should be 2.
But it's not for me to say.
No, right.
Yeah,
right. It's not for me to say.
It is not for me or anyone else. It's up to the members of those lodges that need to make that determination.
But when you're coming to lodge and you're having trouble, there's a pretty large lodge in Wichita that they're having trouble getting 4 people. That's the craziest damn thing I've ever heard in my life. Why? And here's why some lodges aren't merging.
If they're doing that, then they are destroying the brand from within.
They are, 100%. And part of the deal is that particular lodge, we've talked about merging. The big problems with mergers, at least in Wichita, well, what name are we going to keep? Who gives a crap? Call it Wichita Consolidated. I mean...
So, as most things in Masonry, we have had very intelligent men that came up with bylaws and structures, rules of the road. And so we have a very detailed plan on how to do it. And it is what it is. Yeah. And unfortunately, one lodge has to, give some things up. But at the end of the day, if you are dying, you're ruining the brand from within. Get to a lodge where members can be active, things are going on. And Wichita, can we support multiple? We should be able to support 20 lodges. Right. But currently, I think we can only support 2.
Yeah. No, I agree. I just think it's like human beings. We do self-destruct from the inside out. Yes. It's not that self-help into some of the things that we should do. So, Midian selling their building, right? Mm-hmm. And, Russ and I, we've been pretty actively involved in Midian for, behind the scenes on some things. And, when you're pulling money from your long-term investments just to kind of keep the doors open, it just doesn't make sense. So your thoughts on you're a member of Midian, long overdue? Should we have done it?
I don't. So I'm
You indifferent on that one?
not really privy to the internals of what the financials are, except for what I hear at the annual meeting.
Yeah.
That's about the only time that really comes up in detail.
Yeah, fair. Do you think that's a mistake? Let me interrupt you. I may go this way. I'm going to say that's a mistake. I think when you have a building, right? So Midian, as we move forward, every month there should be a detailed financial report. So when we need money or have to do something, nobody's surprised. This whole stuff that they used to do, we had some, we spent some, there's some left over. It kicks you in the butt when you come up and you say, guys, we're in a problem. Why didn't you say anything? I think lodge members and shrine members, you need to be treated like shareholders. Maybe you don't do it in your stated meeting, but before the stated, we're going to have a financial report. Anybody wants to come in and ask questions, we'll go through it in detail. Would you disagree with that?
I would not disagree with that at all.
Could you argue that at Grand Lodge? Wonder why don't we do that in more detail at Grand Lodge? Because that way I think you have more buy-in when we need to ask for money.
Well, so most worshipful Cole Presley would probably call me up over this one.
Don't give a Cole secret away. I might know a Cole secret.
Cole's our grand treasurer.
Yeah.
It's a difficult thing to put together, and that's the big deal. And we don't get most of the records until the annual reports come in.
Fair.
So that's only once a year.
Yeah.
So, how we're doing.
Can you imagine getting your stock report once a year?
Yeah.
You could be in a pickle.
So, about the biggest thing you probably
Your
do
portfolio.
is how we're doing against the budget and how our financials are going as far as our investments. But it's a big thing.
Could you agree, as Masons, obviously when it comes to financials, we could do a lot better with communication?
Yeah, we could.
I'm not talking Grand Lodge. I'm just saying
the thing it is, and that varies from lodge to lodge.
How many lodges have a budget?
Huh? They should have a budget.
Right, now, that's not what the question was.
So the thing of it is, currently we're talking the communication piece of this. Okay, you've got Fred over here who's 93 and makes it to lodge every 3-4 months or once a year, but he doesn't have email. He has a home phone. He doesn't have text. He doesn't have a cell phone. How do you communicate with him without actually giving him a phone call? You send him a piece of mail. The mail's so expensive now, it'd bust a lodge's budget pretty quickly.
So
just by mail.
How you communicate with him is the budget, the financials. All reports are given at once to twice a month in lodge, depending on when they meet. But it is the member's responsibility to show up.
Yeah.
So if he shows up, even so, he may have been active when he was 30, 40, 50, 60. He may only come every once in a while when he's 90. I don't know, but at the end of the day, it's every Mason's responsibility to go to lodge. If that's important to them, then they need to show up.
You got those that can't drive at night. You've got any number.
I'd rather a lodge buy a 15-passenger van than a building to go pick up.
Hallelujah!
That might be an idea.
So, final question. Overall, do you think that and there'll never be an edict, so people don't get all freaked out. Grand Lodge says today, all buildings must be sold to improve the Masonic experience. Do you think Masonry would be better off if all the lodges didn't have their own building, they could just focus on Masonry?
Not all.
How about a majority?
Maybe yes, probably roughly the majority of lodges, yes.
Yeah.
They would be better off if they didn't have the weight of the building. But they're on the other side of that coin. Are they in a community where they have a place they could rent or use as for a lodge function?
Right. It's not a one size fits all. Obviously,
It's not.
It's not a fair question.
There's all kinds of ramifications that have to be dealt with in any.
We ask a lot of unfair questions.
Yeah,
Just-
sure.
We're
for discussion.
it's thought provoking
I've
more than
seen
anything.
this podcast more than once, guys.
Yeah, that's right. So that's all we have. So thanks for joining the Old Fashion Masonic Podcast, and guys, quit holding
Enjoy
on.
it.
Quit holding on to
Always.
your junk buildings.